Pulling teeth. I've been trying to get this thing to work for the last few minutes. I don't understand what happened. Anyway, good morning. I had a meat run last night from the other side of Ann Arbor, Michigan, down here by Cleveland. And I've been up all night. Woo! I've been up all night. I slept maybe an hour before the load, and I slept maybe an hour this morning, and I'm not moving again. I am currently running on wonderful Ohio roads between Canton, Ohio to Lancaster. It's just over 100 miles, so I'll give you short haul, good check, good pay, good rate on this run. Yeah, this highway can stop bouncing any time now. What caught me off guard last night is I went on ahead and decided to live stream late last night, and I turned on at 11:30, and I had a dump truck load of people tune in. I guess there's a bunch of night owls out there that I didn't know existed. But yeah, last night was weird. I had quite a few people on here, and they were chiming in. There was a handful of people from Phoenix, and a guy from Germany, and somebody from Australia. So I guess it just depends on the time zone, I guess. Well, like I said, I'm running on no sleep, and I got a short haul over here to Lancaster. And I've been doing this YouTube thing since 22. Started shooting videos. Most of my stuff's just nonsense. I got some longer ones. I'm very new to live streaming. And there are videos I made a long time ago that I think are better to be made in the live stream format. And one of them is about World War II is my thing. I was introduced when I was 12 years old for Christmas. I got a book, a big, heavy, hardbound book called, I want to say Sports Illustrated. It was Reader's Digest History of World War II, abridged / had pictures and diagrams and stuff in it. And for some reason, that book captured my attention, and that actually encouraged me to start reading. And then I have been a ferocious reader ever since. I have kind of moved on to audiobooks at this point, but World War II has always been my thing. And at the age of 12, when I was 12, all the World War II veterans were my age, in their 50s, so they came a dime a dozen for all intents and purposes, and I would drive these veterans up a freaking wall, asking them questions and asking them what they did and where they were and stuff like that. And as a kid, you don't grasp the concept that maybe they don't want to talk about it. You know, that's not how a kid's brain works. And early on, I realized my grandfather was a World War II veteran, so we were living in Colorado, where I grew up, and they had family farms in western New York. And every summer we'd go out and hang out with my grandparents. And that summer in 1980, I went out and I started driving my grandfather bonkers, and I blindsided him. I said, "Hey, what did you do in the war?" And he fumbled around a little bit, and he said, "I was a mechanic." And I went, "Cool." And I tried to press him for details or some stories or something. And he never really responded after that, after just saying, "I was a mechanic." And I think I pestered him a little more, a couple more summers, and my grandmother pulled me aside and said, "He doesn't like to talk about that." Which again, as a kid, you don't grasp that. And I'm thinking he was a mechanic. I mean, probably not this sophisticated, but what is a mechanic? What horrors does a mechanic experience in war? Busted knuckles, lost your 10mm socket? I mean, seriously. And after a while, I just quit bringing it up. I kept pursuing more knowledge, more veterans to talk to. I found some, even up to the last few years, I found quite a few to battle with. And found more books to read. Kept studying and digging into it. And then the years go by, and I joined the Army. When I enlisted, it was 1986, the very tail end of 1986. I enlisted, and I spent 2.5 years as an enlisted guy and crewed the M1 tank. And then I used my Ninja Jedi skills and bamboozled my way into flight school, and I got to fly the Cobra attack helicopter for the rest of my time in service, so I was a warrant officer. When I was in the enlisted side of it, For some reason, I was at my grandparents' house. I don't know how or why I was able to get there, but I was there during the time I was in service. And that was the time my grandfather talked about World War II. The only time he actually gave details, because I think he understood that I couldn't understand what he was going to say to me. And the reason I remember this conversation so vividly was how weird it started. And we were in the living room, and Grandpa's got his efficient chair, and Grandma's got hers, and I was sitting in hers, but don't tell her. My grandfather's staring towards the TV. TV's off. He's not looking at me. And he says, literally starts, and he's not a talker. Me, I'm a talker. My mouth flaps constantly. My grandfather rarely spoke, and he said, when you're young, your body craves milk. Yeah, that was the opening line. I went, And he goes, your body needs it for bone growth, and your desire for it is very strong into your 20s, and then after that, you can still drink it, but your body's not screaming out for it. And I went, okay. And he said that in the Hawaiian Islands, in the 1930s and the 1940s, milk wasn't readily available. The population was small. The locals drank coconut milk if they needed it, but regular cow milk was not readily available. They simply didn't have the cows available for it, and nobody really cared to get them there. But then when the Japanese started getting feisty in the late 1930s, the U.S. Navy packed up the Pacific Fleet and moved it from San Diego to Honolulu, to Pearl Harbor, and that brought in a whole bunch of Westerners and their families and the military and the support elements, and now you have a huge population that's grown, and they're used to having milk readily available, which it's not. Hey, Yoda. Yeah, and he's talking about this, and we're sitting in this chair. This is a guy who doesn't talk, and we're going to milk. And he said, well, the military, they said they couldn't ship milk over because it wouldn't make the trip. It wouldn't get there in time to be useful. But nobody thought to send more cows. And I went, okay. And he tells me the military would let us have milk once a week. It was a court that you had to sign for it. You had to come in and sign your name on next to your block that said you got your quart of milk, and that was the one you get. And they did it on Sundays because that was the one day you almost guaranteed to be lazy and you could take your time with it. So everybody got excited for Sunday breakfast because you got your quart of milk. Pizza and wings. So he gets up on Sunday, and my grandfather, like I said, he said he was a mechanic, and I found out later on he was an avionics technician, which is, the avionics are the things in the instrument panel on an aircraft, the dashboard, for in other words, the radios, the navigation equipment, the attitude indicator, the pitch change, trim ball, all the stuff in the dashboard is what he worked on. And he was not at Pearl Harbor, he was at a stage field. The Hawaiian Islands and Honolulu especially Oahu had little airfields, little military airfields all over the island, everywhere they had a flat space. And the one he was at was a maintenance facility. And there wasn't an operational basis where people brought in the aircraft and did heavy maintenance and pull them apart and do their work, but he lived there. So Sunday comes around and they're having breakfast, and they got their quart of milk, and here everybody's excited. And they hear the boom of an explosion, and everybody stops. And then you hear another one. It goes, when you have two, it's not a mistake, it's not an accident. And they run outside, and you can't see Pearl Harbor from where they're at. There's a little ridge line, but they can see the smoke come up, and then they see more smoke come up, and you quickly surmise that this isn't an accident if you have multiple explosions in different locations. And then they can see the aircraft swarming around. They said, that's it. It's hitting the fan. And you turn around, they all turned around to run back inside to grab their gear and get dressed properly. And he said the first thing he noticed was every single person had their quart of milk in their hand. He goes, something bad's happening, but no one's going to leave their milk sitting on the table because someone's going to snatch it. It's like, okay. Well, they got their gear, got dressed, ran to the airfield, the little stage field, the maintenance facility they're at, and there's not an operational aircraft on the base. It's just aircraft in pieces, more or less. But when they would pull them apart, they would take the weapons out, and back then, fighter planes had 50 caliber machine guns, and certain aircraft had tail gunners, and the tail gun was a 30 caliber. Well, they had a locker full of weapons, and another bunker locker full of ammunition. The keys to the weapons locker, a guy pulled out of his pocket. The keys to the ammunition locker, the guy, they found out later, the guy that had them was hungover, passed out drunk in Honolulu from partying the night before, and they didn't have a key to get to the ammunition. And the way the lockers work, it's a Quonset hut, which is just a metal half tube with caps on the end. And the Quonset huts were used, well, there was a double layer Quonset hut, and they would pour concrete in it. So you have an inside layer and an outside layer filled with concrete. Now it's a 4-foot thick concrete wall to protect it, so you can't just go over and cut a hole and get in it. So they get in the weapons locker, they're pulling out 50 caliber machine guns, 30 caliber machine guns, and everybody's looking at the locker they can't get into. And within a minute, he said he hears a guy honking the horn on a deuce and a half, and he comes flying around the corner of the deuce and a half, and he's blowing the horn up, and he gets out of the way, and he drives into the bunker going about 35, 40 miles an hour, and slams into it, and breaks the side open, leaves a big gash in it, and two of the smallest guys were able to squeeze through the gash, and they were going to pass out ammunition boxes, but the box wouldn't fit through the gash, so they broke them open, and they just started throwing ammunition out the hole. They're just hands, just throwing belts of ammunition. Now, nobody had a job assignment. This was something outside of what they do. And he said everybody just found a job, and there were guys setting up weapons, makeshift positions, put the machine guns in. He said he spent the whole time running back and forth, tossing ammunition belts to people. And he said the air base, the little stage field they were on, never got bombed, but it got shot at. They would swoop down and try to strafe and try to hit some of the planes. They don't know they're not operational. But these guys are shooting back, and he said he didn't watch a single airplane get shot down, but he did see airplanes eat bullets. Bullets going into the airframe, into the fuselage, and he said he saw more than one leave smoking. And the Japanese task force was 200 miles north of the Hawaiian Islands. And good luck flying 200 miles over water on a single-engine plane, burning oil with holes in it. But the Japanese actually launched 2 attacks. They did their first. They went back. Holy crap! That thing went into reconnect for like 2.5, 3 minutes. I mean, seriously, we're in Ohio. It's not like we're in Siberia or something. Wow. That was horrible. When I first went live this morning, I'm in the middle of Canton, Ohio, and it took 3 or 4 minutes for it to lock on and go, and now this time it just went out for about 2 or 3 minutes driving down the highway. That's bizarre. Wow. Anyway, I was talking about Grandpa and Pearl Harbor. So the Japanese did the first wave, went back, rearmed, refueled, came back and did a second wave, and it was during the second wave they lost most of their aircraft that were shot down because the hornet's nest was stirred up and people were ready for action. And something I read years later about that attack is when the bomb started falling, there was one of the battleships, I don't know which one, there was one parked against the dock and another battleship parked on the outside. And the bomb started going off, and the first weapon on the ship started firing. It was a 50 caliber machine gun, started firing at the planes. And the captain ran outside in his underwear, and it was a guy in an army uniform banging away with a 50 caliber. He's up high on the ship. And that ship survived, and when the dust cleared, that captain found this army guy and said, okay, why are you on the ship, and why are you the first person shooting? He was on guard duty that night, and when he got off, he went to go meet his friend on the ship, and he saw what was unfolding, and the only weapon on there he was familiar with was the 50 cal. So he just said, let's have some fun. He started shooting. But the Japanese had 2 attacks on Pearl Harbor, and my grandfather was there while it was happening at the stage field. They were going to do a 3rd attack, but they canceled because they were getting a little paranoid because the U.S. carriers were missing. So they canceled the third attack, which was going to hit the repair facilities and the fuel storage areas, which would have done tremendous damage. But they didn't do it. They ran off, which, they didn't know where the American carriers were, which they were in the area, but they ran off. So then he headed over to Pearl Harbor proper, and he got to see what had happened to Pearl Harbor up close and personal. And he said when he was over there, he helped out. He did not tell me what he did. He never gave me any indication of what he was doing, but it was close to the bad parts of it. And as my grandfather's talking to me, he starts slowing down. His conversation gets slower, and it starts coming out in spurts. And he was telling me that when the shooting starts and you're on a ship, everybody has a battle station, and everybody runs to their battle station. It's just your training and your instinct that takes you there. And a lot of those guys on that ship, their battle station was down in the bowels, down in the lowest parts of the ship, engine room and whatnot. And a ship, especially a ship back then, you just don't jump in, turn the key, start it up, throw it in gear, and start going. That's not how that works. You got a ship that's tied off to a dock, and the boilers are cold, and there's a process of lighting them and getting them going. It's a process. Well, they couldn't get the ships going. One did. One of the battleships actually got going, but ended up beaching itself because it was starting to sink, trying to leave the harbor. But there's people down there in the bowels, and some of the ships sank, like the Arizona, basically settled on the bottom, exploded and settled. Other ships rolled over, and their bellies were up out of the water. Now, Pearl Harbor, by any measure, was a tactical disaster for the United States, tactical victory for the Japanese, tactical disaster for the United States. But if you were on a ship that was sinking, would you rather be 1,000 miles out to sea or at the dock? And land is right there. I mean, technically it's closer. There was only 2 ships sunk at Pearl Harbor that did not get reused, refloated, reused. So they were able to repair them and bring them back up. But this is where my grandfather had a problem. These ships that rolled over at the dock, and there's pictures of them, we've all seen them. He said that the guys that were trapped in the belly of the ship were tapping on the inside. You could hear the ting, 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 ting sound, letting people know that they were in there and they were alive. Now, I'm not sure what the exact reason was, if they did not have the right kind of equipment or enough of it, or if it simply didn't exist, but they could not get to these guys inside the ships. They couldn't get to them, and they're trapped in there. And whatever my grandfather was doing, helping out, was around this area. And he said, I had to walk down the dock, and you could hear these guys tapping from inside the hull. They're right there. I mean, 25, 30 feet away, they're tapping, and there's nothing you can do for them. You can't help them. You can't do anything. And he says that you're walking on the dock area, and there's people had to, and nobody made eye contact with anybody else. Nobody talked. Everybody just looked straight ahead. And he said, I had to go by that day after day doing whatever it was that he was doing. And he said that tapping, remember the Pearl Harbor attack happened on December 7th, and he said the tapping stopped Christmas Day. And that was the end of the conversation for my grandfather. And it never talked to him, it never spoke of the war again. And he died, I was in 1988, I think, and he died in 95. And that was the last time he ever spoke about it. That's what bothered him. He's a mechanic. He's not, tip of the spear, but he still got traumatized by that. And that made a lot of sense to me. And there's one other guy I want to talk about, was my neighbor growing up in Colorado. The dude that lived next door to me was also a World War II vet, but with a caveat. His name was Mr. Seaman, and he was German, and he fought in the German army on the Eastern Front. So his perspective of the war was completely different from all the other veterans I had talked to over the years. And poor guy, I used to go over to his house and drive him up a freaking wall. I was, I think, 13 at the time, and I was already, he had all kinds of paperback books from the 50s, that those paperbacks are kind of new then. And he would loan me his book collection, and I'd go through it, and bindings were coming off because they were so old. But they were post-war books written by soldiers on both sides. They was kind of entertaining. But again, do veterans want to talk about the war, or do they want to talk about their experiences? Yes, no. And I think I drove this guy crazy, but on another side, there's a distinct possibility I was the only person that ever asked him, because he fought on the German side. And he was a little hesitant to talk to this, bright-eyed, big-eyed little kid who was just, wanting to bother him for more or less war stories. And then he started telling me stuff, and he didn't tell me the mean stuff. He told me the funny stuff. And the little adventures that you never hear about and you never read about in any book, he would start telling me. He was originally trained as a radio operator, and he got sent to North Africa in 1941. And he did the job for a couple of months, and then he got sent back to Germany, and they trained him as a machine gunner. They sent him to the Eastern Front because they had too many radio operators, and they basically needed more bodies to fight the war. And the two things that happened in North Africa that he told me about that absolutely cracked me up. He said the war with the British, the Germans fighting the British, he said it was 9 to 5. And it was, I don't know who came up with it, but there was this unwritten rule, 9 to 5. Anything outside of those hours didn't count. Nobody did anything. Everybody left everybody alone. It was just weird. And he said that they had a communications truck that he was assigned to, a radio truck with antennas all over it. And they had a lieutenant and a couple other people. And he was in country for a short period of time, and they were driving somewhere, and they stopped the truck, and they got out to go do something. They came back, and the truck was gone. Just disappeared. And the lieutenant was angry, and then they said, okay, just sit down for a minute. And they waited around, and about 45 minutes later, the truck came back, being driven by 2 British soldiers, pulled up, got out of the truck, didn't look at him, and just turned around and left, walked off. And they got in their truck and kept going, and he's going, okay, what just happened? He said, they stole the truck. In a combat zone, that's a great, victory for yourself. And he said they did it after 5 o'clock, and they were probably told to bring it back because it was after 5 o'clock. And I'm flipping through a magazine years later, and I got the British side of that, where they literally stole the truck, and they thought it was great, intelligence coup, and their major told them to take it back because it was after 5 o'clock, and you're like, no way, dude. We're at war, but it's game's over, so you gotta. And he said, well, how does that happen? And the other thing that happened was, in aviation, there is an emergency frequency that people will monitor on their radios at all time, no matter where you are. It's on. It's 121.5, or GARD, as they call it. You could be flying across the Atlantic Ocean in the middle of nowhere, 1,000 miles from land, and you pull the trigger on 121.5 and say, hey, I'm having a problem. Somebody could probably hear you who's going to respond, because everybody monitors that frequency. Well, apparently, back then in North Africa, there was a frequency that an emergency frequency that everybody would talk on, where the Germans and the Brits could actually talk to each other if they needed to. He says in one day, a British voice comes on speaking German and says, hey, are you guys out there? And they're like, yeah. And he goes, hey, we're having a malaria outbreak. Do you guys have any quinine? They're like, yeah. Can we get it? How much do you need? He goes, 50,000, units, doses, whatever they call it. He goes, what do you want to trade? And he goes, cigarettes. So 50,000 hits of quinine for 50,000 cigarettes. And they go, okay, and they meet out in the desert and exchange. You go, oh, okay. He wasn't there for the exchange, but he heard the radio traffic, and they literally, the enemy speed up and go, okay, we'll do a little horse trade here, and then go back to their side. And you're like, how does that happen? That's bizarre. Well, he went back to Germany. He went to school to be a machine gunner. And the early war belt-fed weapon the Germans used was called the MG-34. And then they replaced it with the MG-42. And the only real difference is The 42 was sloppier. The MG34 was very precisely made, but a precisely made weapon is not what you want on a battlefield because it's going to get dirty and gunked up. So the 42 was the upgrade because it had a little more sloppy tolerances. And he trained up and he really liked the weapon. And in a twist of ironic fate, in 1987, when I went to Germany in Reforger, I got to go play with the German Army, and they still have that weapon in inventory, even though it's called an MG1. It's an MG42, and I got to shoot one at a range. And it was a nice weapon. The only bad side of it's good and bad is it has a hellaciously high rate of fire, which is good when you're trying to shoot something, but it burns through your ammunition really, really fast. I mean, like buzzsaw fast. But anyway, he went to the Eastern Front, and he had a group around him of 6 or 7 guys, and it seems that he, based on the little tidbits of stories he told me, the Eastern Front for the Germans was broken into the northern sector, the center sector, and the southern sector. Kind of Army Group North, Army Group South is kind of how they broke it up. And it seems he was an Army Group Center, and he got sent east right after Stalingrad got encircled, and he was outside of that, encircled, so he just missed getting wiped out. Tiny Fox, hey, what's up? Cruising down the highway from Canton, Ohio towards Lancaster, Ohio, right now. Picked up a load. I think I've got it's a small pallet. It's paper. It's a paper printing company. I'm not sure what's on it, but it's just a cute little pallet. So he's fallen back across the open plains of Russia and Siberia called the steppe. The words, what they refer to it in their language. And they were falling back, and they didn't have very adequate winter clothing, and they had like a 50-year storm hit them, and the wind, it's 30 below zero, and the winds are howling. And he said that his little group is just trying to find a place to get out of the wind, and there's little gullies here and there, but where they were at, there was nowhere to hide. And what the farmers do, the Russian or Ukrainian farmers, is they scoop hay into a pile. And when I say a pile, think of a 2-car garage. And there was it didn't just make a mound like, cow poop. They made it into a shape, and they had a way of raking it like a circle, so it kind of interlocked, so the wind wouldn't blow it away. Said it was a real interesting way they did it with these gigantic pitchforks. So they're his little team is in a shootout with a little team of Russians, and he goes, you can literally feel yourself freezing to death. It's starting to get dark out. The winds are picking up. There's actually a snowstorm coming at them, and they're in a gunfight with this small Russian group just to take this hay bale. They want to climb inside the hay bale just to get out of the wind. And he said, we're both advancing and we're getting closer, but it is so cold, you can't feel your hands, your feet, your legs, your arms. He said, I lost motor function. Both sides are shooting at each other, but nobody's hitting anything because we can't aim, we can't use our weapons properly. We literally lost control of our bodies. And he said, I can actually feel myself dying from the cold. And one of his guys jumped up and started running towards the hay bale. And then one of the Russian guys jumped up. And then everybody jumped up and dove into the hay bale from both sides. They just burrowed into it. And like I said, it's a big hay bale. There's maybe, 15, 18 guys climbing inside of it. And he says, I got a guy on my left and a guy on my right. And we all kind of dug towards the middle, and we're all kind of touching each other, shoulder to shoulder, and we're shaking and shivering. Said that you could hear the wind outside getting stronger and stronger. He said it was howling, and I took my hand and I reached over next to me on one side, and I felt the material of his pants or his jacket, and he said, okay, that's a German. And he felt the other side and rubbed him, and he goes, ooh, that's a Russian. So they're rubbing shoulders. And as the night wore on, the Russian guy walked his hand over across his chest and tapped on him a couple of times. And he reached his hand on top of him. The Russian guy gave him a piece of bread. So he reached into his bag and broke off a piece of sausage, which is what they carried. And he walked it over and tapped on and handed it back. So they're sharing food. And then he eventually fell asleep, and he said he wakes up and it's quiet and people are moving around, and everybody climbs out of of the hay bale, and the storm's gone. It's a beautiful sunny, it's cold out, but it's a beautiful sunny day. I'm trying to read that. Go Paul Singh. Hey, how you doing down there? Where are you out of, by the way? I'm kind of curious. But he said they came at the hay bale, and they all just kind of stared at each other, and the Russian thumbed at himself and moved his thumb left and right to show all the people, and he pointed. And then they figured out what they were saying. I'm going this way, and the guy in charge of our little group said, okay. They said, we're going that way. And they just walked off, picked up their weapons, and never looked back at each other and wandered off. It was just called a quick timeout. And another thing he told me about was, as the war would drag on, the Germans would set up a defensive position, and the Russians would build up their ammunition and their troops, and they'd build up a big pile of weapons, and they would attack, and the Germans would defend, and the Russians would take incredible casualties. The Germans would run out of ammo and fall back. And he says, so they're dug in. They used to sit there for a couple of months. And the chow train came around, and they were eating. And you have your mess tin, as it were. And while they're eating, the Russians are dropping mortar rounds on their head. And it's kicking up dirt and dust. And he's covering his tray with his hand. And one of the guys took his tray, his lunch tray, and held it up above the parapet where the Russians could see his hand, and shook the tray around, and then brought it back down, and all the shooting stopped. Oh, okay. So, hey, we're having lunch. Good shoot, guys. And they finished eating, and then later on in the day, they were firing some mortar rounds back at the Russian lines, and a Russian held up a mess tin and shook it, so they stopped shooting back at him. Okay. You know, the war going on, but we'd call a timeout for lunch. That was the kind of stuff he told Mr. Seaman. I would imagine he's long gone. But I met some real interesting people. And when I was 14 years old, I worked at an airport that doesn't exist anymore. It's been closed and turned into housing in the town I grew up in. There was a guy there that worked on old airplanes. He had some World War II planes, and I was just a gopher and a cleaner and whatnot. And again, I'm a kid. Well, I'm 14, so I'm practically an adult in my brain. And a guy comes in, and they're talking, and they're describing a maneuver that this guy did. And I'm listening, but not comprehending what he's saying. And these guys are all like, kind of, when he's telling the story, they're all going like, no way, like, there's no way you did that. Yeah, it works. And how he escaped getting shot down by a hotshot German pilot. This guy flew P-51s, and years later, here on the YouTube channel, I find a video, and there's an old guy telling that exact same story, and as I'm staring at him, it's the same guy, except he's, substantially older now. And I had to watch this video 4 or 5 times. If you go on YouTube and put in P-51 Mustang, one of the first things that'll pop up is a picture. It's like kind of animated, and it's a P-51 flying away from you, and there's, like, you can see the ground underneath is kind of green, and he's like firing weapons at something. It looks kind of like a cartoon that's animated. And it's a 30-minute long video. If you go to about the 9-minute mark and watch it, you can see what this guy did. And it's taking the laws of physics and aerodynamics and wringing it out and throwing it up on the clothesline. Airspeed and altitude is your number one asset in air-to-air combat. And the way, go a little technical here, the way an airplane, the way you get lift off an aircraft is it's off the top of the wing. The bottom of, generally speaking, the bottom of your wing is flat, the top of your wing goes up and comes back down again. And what happens is air hits the front of the wing, goes under, and then air hits the same front of the wing, goes over, and then because of that hump, it leaves a void on the backside. and then and then suction is trying to pull the aircraft up to close the void, if that makes sense. So the lift on your wing comes from the top, not the bottom. Hey Chris, what's up? And this guy is in a P-51, and he is diving with a German on his tail, and he said, I can't shake this guy. And it was weird this late in the war to find a pilot that was that good. And he is spiraling out of the sky, and he's pulling G's. He's pulling 4 G's in a turn. Now, the wind that is hitting your wing coming at you, that wind coming at you is called relative wind. And the angle, it has to hit it kind of straight on. You can get up to 15, 18 degrees if you pick your nose up, and it exceeds that angle. The aerodynamic airflow will screw up and you'll stall. The aircraft will actually stop flying. And he's in a right spiral turn coming out of the sky, and this guy's staying with him, which he said he really shouldn't have been able to do. And you've got a rear view mirror above your head there, and he's looking at the guy, and he's finally got his gun on him, which if you're in a turn like that and you're pointing your weapon, by the time the bullets get there, you won't be there. So they have to actually get the guns out in front of you, the nose of the aircraft, and fire in front of you. And he said this guy's getting closer and closer, and he's starting to pull up. And this guy does a maneuver. It was called a double vertical reversement or something weird. It's an aerodynamic, are you kidding me? So picture this, you're kind of laying on your right shoulder, sitting like in a seat, like you're flying, and you're laying over on your right side, and he's pulling that stick, pulling those G's. And as he's turning to the right, he takes the stick and he snaps it into his gut as hard as he can, which stalls the aircraft. He stomps down pedal so the nose pitches down. Then he throws the stick forward. Now the wind is hitting the wing from the top. The aircraft stops in mid-flight. The torque of the propeller spins the aircraft 180 degrees, and then it falls straight down. And you stop and go, you can't do that. That's not, you can't do that. That's not how airplanes work. And there's a computer animation on that video. Look for, again, YouTube, P-51 Mustang. It'd be like the first or second thing. It's like a quartering angle from behind, a cartoonish, firing at an airplane. Watch that video. And the guy's name is Cabrera. And I watched that a handful of times to try to grasp how he did that maneuver, because the Germans got him, he's got him, whoop, gone. He just spins around and falls out of the sky. And he fell like 2,500 feet before he picked up enough airspeed to start flying again. And I heard the story firsthand, but my brain didn't lock on to what he was saying. I didn't really understand it. But it's just, And on the topic of fighter airplanes, there's been an argument that's been out there. What was the best fighter aircraft of the war? And of course the answer is the P-51 Mustang. The Spitfire was very comparable, but the Spitfire had a teensy-weensy fuel tank. It could only fly for like 45 minutes. So the Spitfire could do awesome things over their airfield, but the Mustang could fly all the way to Berlin and do the same mission. And that was the Achilles heel of the Spitfire. But the P-51 Mustang was the answer, and they made a listing of what makes an aircraft. Well, yes, I'm in Ohio. I am between Common Diamond. Yeah, I'm between Cantor and heading towards Lancaster, and I'm going to be there in about an hour and 20 minutes right here. Okay, so what makes the best airplane? Okay, you've got speed, maneuverability, climb rate, firepower, reliability, fuel range, visibility, maintenance, blah, 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 blah. Oh yeah, and it's being flown by a 250-hour pilot. Think of NASCAR. Some 15-year-old kid gets his learner's permit and they stick him in NASCAR and they say go. There's about 100 P-51s in the world right now, and there's nobody under 10,000 hours even allowed to sit in the cockpit, let alone fly it. These guys get their flight training, they stick them in this super hot plane and send them off into combat. You go, okay. Oof. Yeah, I read voraciously for years and years and years, and I've kind of slowed down a little on reading. I'm more into audiobooks now because it's easier to be cruising down the road listening to them than taking the time to read. And I like that. And this live stream stuff. I kind of enjoy this. This is new for me. If anybody's got a question or a topic they'd like to branch off into, I'm all ears. And I was saying early on, I drove late last night, and I went live at 11:30 at night here at, heck was it, Michigan, and I had like 50 and 60 people on here in the middle of the night, which is bizarre. There'd be that many people up that late. I had one guy from Germany and one guy from Australia who was on there. I thought that was kind of cool. We're 42 minutes into this. I usually go about an hour. I like it when people come up with topics or questions or something. That makes it easier to continue battling. But I had a total of 3 loads yesterday, which is a lot in one day. And I dropped off at 4:45 this morning. Oh, another sub. Hey, thanks. I'm trying to read. It's hard to see this handwriting. BMW Motorsports. Actually, BMW or Variant Motorworks. Well, thanks for subbing. Oh, here we go. I'm not supposed to do this, but we're on a slight downhill slope, and it's not even remotely legal, but I kicked the van into neutral, turn off the cruise control, and I let gravity pull me down the hill. So I get my gas mileage up. It's maintaining speed too, so that's cool. Keep it going. Yeah, my favorite load that I've ever done in this van, I was in western New York. Never put up with that. And a guy called me late in the day, and I picked up a little tiny pallet. It was a standard size pallet, but it was only like 6 inches tall, the load. I don't know, it was a carbon gasket. I don't know what that is. Huge. I mean, it's, 35, 40 inches diameter. I don't know what they're used for. But I picked up this gasket and I drove it from Niagara Falls, New York, which is right up on the Canadian water before you cross over to Canada, and I took it to Los Angeles. And I got to I got to drive up over the Rockies, across the plains. I really enjoyed that drive. And it paid enough to cover the whole week and somewhat into the next week, which was cool. Oh. Overcast today, which helps a little bit with the heat. Alright, I gotta go around this guy. Now I'm back on cruise, and again, I go 62 everywhere I go, and I'm doing 21.6 miles per gallon on this tank so far. And I have gotten as high as 25 out of this thing, which is crazy for a box van. Look at that, I'm passing you going 62. What's wrong with you? I had somebody on here last night asking me about expediting, which is what I'm doing. This job is essentially truck driving in a box van, but it's a simpler version of it. Trucks, to do this, you don't have to have a CDL. I have one, but you don't have to have a CDL. You can do this on a basic driver's license. You don't have to fight to find parking, because big trucks struggle to find parking. What's that say? I'm trying to reach really small. Batista Zatti. I'm back at you. I can never have a problem finding parking. I can drive this truck to the grocery store if I need to. I don't have to worry about low bridges. I don't have to keep logbooks. I'm not restricted to driving 11 hours a day. I can drive for 20 hours straight if I want to. I don't go through commercial vehicle checkpoints. I don't get bothered by the DOT because this vehicle is under 10,000 pounds. The insurance is less. The operational costs are less. Because all the way around, this is a a good thing. You pick up and drop off, 95% of the time it's a single pallet. Occasionally you get two, but it's a single pallet. And you go in to the dock. I don't use the dock. I use a ramp. And it takes a certain amount of time to load or unload a truck, and it takes almost no time at all to load or unload a van, so they would just rather get you in and get you out because you're the easiest problem they can solve. And so you tell them, oh, I'm in an expedite van. They go, oh, cool, we'll just grab his and we're done. We can get him out of here. So they get you in and out of a plant or a yard or a dock a lot quicker. And I like that. And a lot of the drivers who do this used to be truck drivers. It's not uncommon. And to say it's just easier to do. If you're ever interested in getting into...
Place to work here. I have CB.
Whoa, CB, sorry. PA, no, I am in Ohio. The terrain's very similar, but I am driving between Canton
I don't know if he's still there or what, but...
Well, this guy likes to hear his voice. Unlike me, no, I'm going between Canton, Ohio and Lancaster, Ohio. I'm on 77 right now, heading southbound. But yes, this very much looks like Pennsylvania, I agree. If you ever want to get into expediting, if you want to try this out, because this isn't for everybody, the easiest way to do it is to contact an expediting company, pick one, not that much of a difference, and say you want to be a fleet driver. Now, the company itself doesn't own any vehicles, but kind of like an Airbnb, a private person will own 1 or 5 or 10 vans, and they'll hire drivers to drive them, and there's some kind of financial deal between the driver and the owner. I don't know what it is. It seems like, just in the most generic terms, the owner owns the van and pays for the insurance and the maintenance, but the driver pays for his fuel, and then they split the proceeds from the loads, and it seems like it's 70-30 or 65-35 or something like that. Yeah, I'm back to coasting again. Some numbers. That's the cheapest way to get it. You're not going to make a tremendous amount of money, but you can stick your toe in the pool. And I was talking last night about this. There's a dude, a young guy, he's in his 20s, and he popped up on YouTube here now 5 months ago, and he went in heavy. He bought a brand new Mercedes Sprinter van, that big one that you can put like 4 pallets in, but you never get loads that big. This guy dropped $65,000-$70,000 on a brand new van, outfitted it, bed, refrigerator, TV, microwave. He set himself up for long haul, and he lasted, I think, 3 weeks, and then announced he didn't like the job and he was going to sell the van. Oh, that's an expensive lesson, dude. Why don't you go drive for somebody, see if you even like doing this, because this isn't for everybody. It's like all jobs are not for everybody. You're away from home a lot. You sleep kind of rough. I got a fold down bunk back here. You got to go try it out first. From what I can see, most of the guys and girls sometimes doing this job are 40 plus years old. I don't see a lot of young people doing this. And I don't know why that is. Maybe there's more exciting things to do. But this is relaxing, and I'm just doing this to get to retirement. I've got a few years to go. I don't mind driving. I don't mind meeting people. And now I'm getting to play on YouTube and live stream. Climbing. 21.6 miles per gallon. Same guy, my neighbor, Mr. Seaman, another thing he told me, his little crew, he had his belt-fed MG42 machine gun, and occasionally he couldn't use it because it would either get blown up or, mortar would hit it or get damaged, or he'd have to be somewhere else and use a bolt-action rifle, and he said he felt naked when he just had a bolt-action rifle. He was so used to having that weapon, so he said they would dig in a hole, a defensive position, and they would gather. When you shoot a machine gun, the barrel gets hot. you have to swap out the barrels. So the whole point is to have spare barrels and have as much ammunition to get your hands on. So he said they would forge. You know, one of the guys would find food, one of the guys would find ammunition, some of the guys would dig holes to make the bunker, other guy would find water. They just all kind of had a mission to what they would do to get themselves set up. And he goes, we now have 10,000 rounds of ammo and 3 spare barrels, and this is going to be great. The Russians attack, and they just do the human wave thing, where they just run at you, which is idiotic. They would throw bodies at you, and they're just blowing these guys down. And then they would go, okay, we got to fall back. And they go, why? We're out of ammo. We had 10,000 rounds. Yeah, I know, but we're out of ammo. It's like, sure. They'd fall back. Start over again. It was just like, human life didn't really mean anything. It's crazy. Okay, get rid of the bottom of the hill here. Oh. Yeah, gotta pick it back up. Back up to speed. Here we go. What I like about this Transit, it has a 10-speed automatic, and you can drop it into manual mode, and there's a little thumb toggle, and you can actually shift up and down. So if you're on a long hill and you don't want it to run out of control, you can ride the transmission down the hill if it's really steep. And it's basic driving, and I could not tell you how many giant trucks I've been behind going down a long hill, and they're standing on their brakes. You see the brake lights, and then you can smell the brakes, and then you can see the brake smoke coming off, the white smoke coming off the back, and you're like, dude, driving 101, let the transmission carry it down the hill. Instead of smoking your brakes, and if you smoke your brakes too bad, they don't work. They'll glaze over and you will have no brakes. And that can get, I don't know, problematic. Look on the right, that's a garbage truck. It seems a little unnecessary. Beautiful terrain out here, though. I like this. Something that I've started seeing here in the last month and a half all over the East Coast is I'm going through these little towns that 5 years ago you would describe as a town that's seen better days. You go through the downtown area and it's closed businesses and the buildings are looking a little shabby. I used to see that a lot, but now, I don't know, people just rolled out of bed and decided to make it look nice. And these little towns, they've cleaned up the downtown area, and they haven't modernized it. They made it stay retro, but they made it clean and straight, and painted it, and kept the old architecture. And there's little shops and restaurants, and they put up super decorative street lights. And sometimes they put in brick roads and took out the asphalt. It just looks nice. And there's a lot of them driving around. And I went through again, middle of the night, and there was nobody, and it was the same setup except the lights were on, and it had beautiful, kind of like Christmas lights, but they weren't, and they were everywhere, and the town looked awesome. As I went through there, I was impressed. These little towns are spending time, money, and energy to make them look really presentable and really inviting. And I was taken aback, and I would be talking to my wife, and I would go, live camera, and I'd turn the phone, see, off to the left or right. I said, look at this. What this looks like. This is just beautiful up here. And I like towns like that. Well, thanks for helping keep me awake. Like I said, I'm running on like no sleep right now. And it's weird. When I'm wide awake and well rested, I can't get a load. But when I'm exhausted, curl up in the phone starts ringing off the hook. But isn't that the way it always happens? Cool. So this shows me getting there at noon, whatever time zone I'm in. I don't know what time zone I'm in anymore. And then I'm going to go hole up somewhere and try to go back to sleep. I would love to have a California run right about now. Like later today, early tomorrow, get a call and say, yeah, have this in California on Monday. That would be an awesome way to end the week. Okay, I got to branch off here. This is a cutoff 70 west, so it's Columbus. Strange you could be driving on these bouncy highways and you hit a state line and the highways completely change in the blink of an eye. Either they get better or they get terrible. No pattern. Okay, I gotta slow down just a little bit here. Keep this high performance machine between the lines. Right there. Okay, that right in front of us on pilot 309. Ouch. I was in Texas when I left here the other day. It was $2.40 a gallon for fuel, and that says 309. Alright, there's my last hop. Lancaster. I'm going straight west right now. I have the app on my phone for Pilot Flying J. Having the app gets you little benefits, and being a veteran gets you a 10% discount off everything. And I get 10 cents a gallon savings, which I use. That's why I use Pilot Flying J. Oh, and I get credits for going to use the shower. That's a nice benefit. But it was a buy one, get one on orange juice, and I slammed 2 orange juices here when I got back in the van. It's like a sugar rush. Well, sugar rush is gone. Ooh, now back to the entire. Yeah, this is the first overcast day we've had in a while. It's usually sunny out. My wife showed me a guy in China, Taiwan or mainland, I don't know which. And he's got people subbing and watching his live stream, and all he does is film himself sleeping wearing a CPAP machine. How does that work? You flip on your camera and you go to sleep, and people watch you. I missed my call. Wow. Everybody's blowing past me because I'm doing, what's my speed? 62. That's why everybody's going around me. 21.7 miles per gallon. Not bad, not bad. All right, we're at 1 hour, and I usually cut these off at an hour unless we got a topic going. I don't really have anything left for this World War II thing, but I will catch up with you guys. I'll probably do this again tomorrow. I kind of enjoy it. It helps me pass the time, and I like when people come in here with some fun comments and questions. Sometimes we spin off in a direction, and I enjoy that. But I'll catch up with you guys later.